So as I said, we are an education IT provider and we work with Microsoft as a global training partner. And one of the things that we do is transform schools by working with their leadership teams, by working with their IT departments, their staff, everybody involved, to bring about manageable change to help improve the standards across the entire school. We this afternoon are going to consider, well, why would you want to transform, and why in particular use the Microsoft Educational Transformation Framework. And that's usually where people start. Well, the simple fact is, and it's been even more relevant in recent times, that we are in a constantly changing world. And if you don't change, certainly the acceleration related to change will get ahead of you and you will end up trying to play catch up. So one of the things that the Educational Transformation Framework does from Microsoft is try to get you to stop, reflect, take a snapshot of where you are now and plan a way forward that complements the existing school development planning, but helps to enhance it and add to it, and consider how technology may play a part in that change. If we just pause and look at the future of the students we've got attending our schools and colleges, and the fact that at the moment 47% of those jobs that are going to be in existence are going to involve using machines over the next 2 decades, and 33% of them is going to be around technology in particular. And then you've got, if you drill down further still, that you're going to have 65,000 new jobs in IT alone in 2024. So we want to prepare not just our students for the future that might be waiting for them, but also prepare the staff that are working in our educational institutions to make sure that they've got the best opportunities to move forwards and build their skill set. So we're not just preparing the students, but we're preparing our staff to give the best possible experience to the students while they're with us, but also be successful in positions that they'll go on to as well. Welcome to other people that have just joined. The consideration is that we've all got traditional methods to complement the use of technology. But when it comes down to it, a lot of what we do, certainly on the teaching and learning side, is going to be driven by the quality first teaching that we're delivering in school and what we do with the other assets that we have around us. The Educational Transformation Framework will be all about trying to define where you want to go. What are your priorities? What we're going to set as a year one priority, what's going to be further down the line. Maybe that there's a budgetary constraint. It might be that there's a staffing need and you've got together a team of people, but you need to enhance that further still. There'll be things which are quick wins, they're easy to achieve, and others that will be further down the line. And the Educational Transformation Framework will help you to think about those and prioritize, but also develop a strategy around a vision and a roadmap to get there. But it all starts with leaders. And I'm not talking necessarily leadership of the school or the college. What I'm talking about are those digital ambassadors that you're going to have within your staff, or maybe even your students as well, that want to get on board to help support this change and make it become a reality. The areas that are particularly important is to think about how to transform and why is it important to get those educational leaders in there. And it's more important than it ever has been in order to get that to move forwards. But often when you think about it, a lot of what you need in the enthusiasm and the capacity to do it is often there. It might be that people haven't had a chance to show that, or there hasn't been a platform to get involved, or maybe that somebody's in a position already, but they haven't necessarily been promoted to move forwards. So the Educational Transformation Framework is very much about teaching and leadership, and it will get you to think about those initially when you're starting to make those very first plans. But above anything else, that school-wide transformation, as with many of our development plans, is going to need to be strategic, and it's also going to need to be holistic. It's no good deciding to implement a change strategy if you've got half of the people that work there not on board. It has to be a vision that's realised and understood and almost just oozed through the fabric of your institution, and everybody's on board with trying to make that reality constantly. That's very challenging to achieve, but not impossible, and that comes from having that catalyst at the middle and bringing everyone in so that you can get that gathering momentum of change. So if we look at a traditional school model, you've got a lot of data, and it might be stored in multiple places or third-party apps, whether that's an MIS system or whether it's a particular platform where you might have for a subject or you might have for a faculty or a key stage. And they don't always link up, although it is getting easier with sync tools between. And we're also in consideration of the integrity of that data. All too often, that's something that can be hard to understand, but also the quality assurance around the data or the system that is giving you the information. It might be that you've got an MIS, but you have to involve a lot of time there customizing or building delivery graphs or dashboards that will give you the information you need to make some meaningful use of the data you've got in that system. There's good need for high levels of redundancy, so it might be that you've got a lot of your systems on site, and that's very much dependent upon the technology you have in school, be it devices that people use as laptops or desktop computers, and when they start working, if it's a teacher's desktop and that's at the front of a classroom and it's linked to the interactive whiteboard, that can be catastrophic for just delivering lessons on a daily basis. But it might be even more complex than that, in the fact that you've got a server and that server might go down, and it's a really costly thing to have redundancy set up on premise. And in a traditional model, a lot of technology that's involved there and has to be thought of for not just redundancy when you're doing it, but also replacement programs moving forwards. So the costing, as we all know, budgets are getting tighter, and it can be really difficult to find the money to replace that on-premise technology. It can also be compounded by not having a clear picture of the data across all systems, and it just stays out there. So you've got your school sat in the middle and everything else feeding back into it. What we need to drive towards is very much a new model, and in that new model, systems are simplified, so there's less of them, so you get a system that has more functions to it, but also there's a greater degree of link between them, so that you've got high integrity, consistent data. If it changes in one system, it moves across to the other. If a decision's made here, it automatically has an output there, so that you haven't got all these systems working in silos and not really talking to each other, or relying upon a high degree of workload from staff to manage them and move data from one place to the other. Also, about the ability to engage with them really easy. They have really clear user interfaces, so you know exactly where to go to get the information you want, and it's not too far to go, as in it's not too deep or hidden within a platform, and you can easily get to it. So you can just get on with doing your job, and you're not wasting time grappling with the platform or the application. Also, that data gives you some indication of performance, be that academic performance, be that performance of the staff or the performance of the educational institution, and that you can then more easily find where you've got spending going into those systems, where it's having impact, or maybe where you need to spend more time looking at it. It also is really useful for the financial, and it helps you to then forecast where you might need to invest further still, whether it's in staffing or whether it's in a system that you're going to move to get away from having a lot of technology on site. So the education transformation framework will get you to consider what are the flexible learning spaces we have. And you really want to create something to inspire learning. That doesn't have to be spending a huge amount of money having areas of the building rebuilt or redeveloped. That could be making the most of the existing space you have and getting free resources to make it better. So an example that I saw recently, the school that I was working with, they wanted to create an inspirational space around coding for the computing curriculum. And what they did is they approached Microsoft to get lots of decals and stickers and things in. On the walls, they had different coloured walls around the Minecraft theme, and then they put Minecraft decals and stickers all around the room. And the mindset of the students coming into that area completely changed. And they were far more open and enthused to what they were going to be doing. And it ended up not just being used by the IT department for computing or coding, it ended up being used by other subjects across the school as well. It's thinking also about the anytime, anywhere philosophy, that education isn't going to be tethered to the classroom any longer. You can have devices that are extremely mobile and portable. And if you're moving away from on-premise systems in school, that you're going to have a greater degree of cloud, which could allow for flexibility of taking learning outside the classroom. So it doesn't always have to take place inside of a room, inside of a building. It also gives you a greater opportunity, tempered with reducing workloads, to personalize learning, and that could be done through OneNote class notebook and sending out resources. But you can bring in those exciting technologies. We've already mentioned Minecraft Education Edition, but it could be using VR or augmented reality and getting those technologies in. And it doesn't have to be an investment in having lots of headsets. It could be just you are going to create augmented reality and you're going to have something explained. Maybe it's how a volcano erupts, and you're going to do that by overlaying on a normal background. But all of that is going to be underpinned by a data-rich, joined-up database that will help to drive interventions and inform where you're going to invest time and money next. So how does our school or college get there? The educational transformation framework is the vehicle to do that. It's a proven framework that's been driven by success, and it's not just been developed by Microsoft. It's very, very firmly been rooted in schools leading with it and Microsoft listening, and it's been refined over and over again, not just in a single country, but different countries around the world. So this isn't based on just one particular education system. It's based on transferable skills and knowledge from global partners. It's also something that has a lot of real life examples and will provide a context for what you're trying to achieve. The educational transformation framework is made up of 4 pillars, and those 4 pillars are around leadership and policy, teaching and learning, intelligent environments, and that student and school success. If we were to go down below those pillars, they are then split up into subsequent sections for each pillar. And those sections are the underpin and and foundation stones of the educational transformation framework. All those areas will need to be considered. There tends to be more emphasis on leadership and policy and teaching and learning than necessarily intelligent environments and student and school success, but it's not overlooking them because they are important. Why use it? Well, it's extremely good at complementing existing planning. And one thing I said at the beginning of this was not to think of this as reset or replace. It's very much, it will work alongside in the symbiotic nature to complement your existing school development planning. You may have already highlighted you want to get more pupil or student devices into your establishment. That's fine, but then using the educational transformation framework might get you to think about intelligent environments, how that impacts upon teaching and learning in different ways to the ones you've already perceived it. That 4-pillar approach is very much holistic, and it will make you take a 360 all the time about what's going on. And because you've got a digital leaders group steering this against the wider staff, you'll have different stakeholders involved that you can reflect this against, and then you'll have a roadmap and also a vision, which is something that you will prepare early doors. Now, you may already have that, and what you're going to do, as I said, is add on top of that or reinform it, or you may prioritize something and bring it forwards that you thought maybe wasn't a priority, but actually realize you need that before you move forwards. But at the same time, it gives you a degree of flexibility. Because you're using a larger framework, you're able to tap into other schools globally or within your country that are using the same transformation program and ask them questions. I think one of the things that certainly supported me when I came from doing this from a teaching background is that I suddenly had people outside of my school to reflect and bounce things off of. And it was really hard being in isolation And at that point, I didn't have a group of staff with me. And I was trying to imagine this. I was trying to come up with a vision. I was trying to drive that change. And I didn't have anyone to talk to. But being able to go to the community that Microsoft has that are all using the educational transformation framework, I could build a network of like-minded people to help me do that. So that think big is really important to get your vision and your roadmap. But then it's equally important to come back and just approach things in small, manageable chunks. If you try to do a year's worth of transformation, you're going to fail, you'll be overwhelmed, or things just won't be dealt with in the thoroughness that they need to be. So just try to pick things off a little piece at a time. And you're going to need to start from the very inside of your organization. And it might be that there's a high degree of training required. Frequently around this, there is, to make sure that staff are supported and that they know exactly how to use what you're proposing to do to the best of their ability for their different roles. So we've mentioned teaching and learning an awful lot, but it might be, for instance, you're going to introduce Microsoft Teams, and that's going to be your platform for improving communication alongside using email traditionally. But before you even go to do that, you need to think about the setup and the rollout. But while that's happening, you need to make sure that staff have got the appropriate skills to use it to the best of its potential so that it has that impact of improving communication within your school or college. There's also the ability to think about the school primarily, but don't overlook the other stakeholders, whether it's governors, trustees, whether you're part of an academy in the UK, or maybe your parents as well. They're equally important to bring along on this journey and make sure that they feel they're part of it. Or if there's something that affects them because their child is all of a sudden moving to using a certain device more frequently or a different piece of platform more readily, you've got to make sure that they know what they're doing so they can support the school and that you get success there, not just internally, but externally as well. And keep evaluating, and some of that will be just evaluating formatively, but you may be evaluating summatively, and you're going to bring in data to that. So there's going to be a quantitative element there as well. Before we go on to look at the 4 pillars, has anybody got any questions they want to ask? You can pop them into the chat. Or is there anything that you want to share of insights of what you're already doing in your own establishment and how it is looking for you? Not at the moment. Okay, I'll continue on through. Feel free to pop anything into the chat at any point. I will come back and check that for you and pick up any questions that you may have. So if we have a look at the 4 pillars in a little bit of detail, we aren't going to go really deep today. This is a initial session just to get a flavour of what the ETF is and how it works. There are then workshops that come after this if it's something you wanted to sign up to, and those will run later on in the year if you're interested in doing that. And we would look at different sections of each pillar. There would also be support documents to support that planning. And if you haven't got something in place, you're welcome to use those documents. Or if you've already got a system that you're using or a set of documents that you have, you can borrow from those documents that we give you, and you can use that to enhance what you have. So leadership and policy considers your vision for change. That will be very firmly linked to the roadmap that you've got. Now, that could be a 3-year or 5-year plan. It does change, but don't get too hung up on those latter years. They inevitably aren't that detailed to begin with. And also things that you might plan there often are affected by what happens in the early years, or a new technology might come out or a different priority happens, and then that skews what you've got. It's really important, as I said, to get that community engagement and partnerships alongside this, and that you are driving a capacity to continually improve, and you've got a culture where people are open to change and they want to move forwards. The most important thing here is not to rush in with the leadership and policy element. It's really to think it through before you go and discuss it with the wider staff or governors or parents, whoever it is, to make sure you thought through, well, is it going to be successful? Is there something we need to do maybe about technical or spend, or we need to invest in the infrastructure that we've got inside of school before it's possible to use a new set of devices? And it might be you need to get a new wireless network, because if you decide to get a lot of people laptops, then they're going to fall down because they won't be able to connect effectively. Everyone has a bad experience. So therefore, we need to pause the new devices to year 2, and we need to invest in year 1 on getting our infrastructure correct. It's not exciting, it's not flashy, people don't obviously see it, but what they will do is find a higher quality, smoother experience, which in the long term will pay off. And it's certainly better than going for the visible element, which is putting devices in, and then finding, from teaching and learning perspective, all you're getting is staff or pupils and students with absolute frustration because they log on and they can't make use of the application that you are intending to use. So you need to consider, think big, but what would your education system look like? It's one of those where you may well have very strong ideas about what you want to do, but you need to just temper that with the reality of the situation. Maybe you need to recruit someone to help you with this. Maybe you need to go and get more external help. Maybe you need to bring in an external consultant or project manager. Whatever it is, there may be things that mean your vision takes longer to realize, but do come up very beginning of this process about what you want it to look like. You've probably got really strong feelings about how I want this to look and feel when you come into this building or when you're part of our team. And it's really important to get that in a high degree of clarity at the beginning. And it helps certainly with the learning and transformation of the digital staffing side. So then there's the success in leading change. You need to think about, well, why do you need this vision for transforming? Sometimes we have great ideas and we think they'd be lovely to realize, but they aren't always the most practical, or sometimes they aren't always going to have the most impact. So those end up considering whether they need to go to year 4 or year 5. And it might be that you have some more immediate concerns to address. It could be that you have some sort of audit or inspection and that highlights other priorities. It might be that you have an intake of students with different learning needs, and therefore that means you need to flex as a school or a college and provide for them. So there's an awful lot of changes that will define what your success in learning and leading and learning looks like. You need to think about all aspects of life in your educational institution. You're also going to need to think about how it's going to inform planning and development, and also procedure and associated policies. And then it might be that you need to work on getting procedures fit for purpose alongside realizing that year 1 vision. Procedures might be that you're going to do something really simplistic, such as it's been really chaotic to organize resourcing of rooms around a building. And what you're going to do is you're going to move to Microsoft Bookings. But in order to do that, you need to change the way that a process works. It sounds really small, but it can have massive impact if suddenly rooms are double booked because someone didn't realize how to use a new system, or it was being used incorrectly, or people just ignored it and tried to turn up to a room and take it and use it. There's various scenarios where that training that we spoke about earlier is so important. But you don't want to lose the characteristics or what the organization stands for. And also you need to be reflective of what's going on in the world. We've been massively impacted by COVID-19 globally, and one of those has been moving to hybrid learning. So we may have used more of Teams to deliver video lessons, we might have used more of OneNote plus Notebook, but then we consider, when we get everyone back into school, well, do we still want to do that? Well, there's going to be relevant sections that you will bring forward, whether that's using assignments in Teams to set homework, and you can make a cost saving because maybe some of those third-party platforms that you used previously you can get rid of and bring that money back in to invest in other ways. And people get used to using those systems during periods of time like lockdown, but certainly as a driver of change, those global events will drive the way that we work and change it at a much faster pace than one that we've planned for, because we've got no choice. We've got to go headlong into it, and we've got to do something now. So thinking about the people that are involved in that transformation process, there's going to be some typical approaches to change. One is the planned approach, and we've spoken about it there. The other is ad hoc. And ad hoc occurred recently, as we said, with the pandemic, but sometimes it might occur for other reasons. Maybe you've lost a particular member of staff and they're no longer there to help with a particular system, and you've just got to get on and have a go with doing it. Hopefully, it's going to be driven by a strong vision of where you want to be, or it could be driven by compliance. And by compliance, it might be that there's a certain thing that you need to achieve because there's an external force or an external body that's telling you need to get there. Maybe it's been identified that reading or writing is a priority in your establishment, and therefore that is going to be the thing that you need to be compliant with. Well, it might be thinking about, what have we got that we could use in our educational transformation program? Well, maybe we could bring in something like immersive reader, and that would help for access to learning with pupils. What will work in this process of driving change with people is thinking about the approach, whether it's going to be bottom up with top down or outside inside, or it's going to be proactive or reactive. And from an awful lot of research globally, there is one true way that you can bring about change that's going to have longevity, and that is collaborative vision. A lot of ad hoc, it might be okay for very small knee jerks, but if you do too much ad hoc planning and throw things into the mix, it creates chaos. If you don't have a vision and you don't communicate that vision widely and everyone shares it and understands it, it can fail. But the vision needs to also be relevant for wherever you are working, but also within the defined parameters of what you've got available to you, whether that's finance, whether that's technology on site, whether that's platforms you've got access to in the cloud like Office 365. It needs to be in depth, and that's fundamental to the success of it, but it also needs to be able to scale, and that scale needs to be widespread across the organization. It's no good coming up with a concept that only works for maybe teaching staff and support staff for the teaching and learning focus, and does absolutely nothing for an admin team or site services with caretakers. It's got to work for everyone, and it's got to benefit everyone, but everyone has to understand it because there's a collaborative and clear vision available. If you think about the process of change, it comes back to a really famous graph, which is being developed and shared by Everett Rogers and Jeffrey Moore, and it's strategies to cross the chasm. You're going to always have innovators and early adopters. They're the people who go, yes, wow, I love this, I want to go for it. They may well be on your digital transformation team. They're going to be the visionaries that don't mind taking a chance. They're happy to put it out there. Take a risk, albeit calculated, and try embracing the new thing. Then you're going to hit the chasm before you hit the early majority. The chasm is the bit which you've got to get people to cross in order to get the majority on that curve to come on board. The early majority is often supported by bringing in training, and those people that were wavering one way or the other will often come with you because they will suddenly see the light, they'll have the epiphany, and they'll see the relevance to what you're trying to do with the vision and the change behind the vision. And then behind that, you're going to get the late majority, those people that go, do you know what, I'll just see what those early adopters are going to do, and whether it's going to cause any bumps in the road. I might stick with my paper planning for now. We won't move to online planning, but they may come in the end. And then you've got what's called the laggards at the end, which really will drag their heels and not want to come with you. And you're going to have to invest time, whether that's additional training, or you get them involved by having them as a pilot group, or you have them brought in to give them additional support, or you need to target them through a department or a key stage or a phase. But they can be often the most difficult to reach, but they do typically make up about 15% of the staff that you'll have in an organization. So it's important not to overlook them. Otherwise, you've got 45% with you, and you've got this other band which are merrily still going off in a different direction to you, and you need to keep everybody on board during that transformation process. The 5 building blocks that you're going to get used to considering during the education transformation framework, if it's a strategy that you adopt, is being aware of what's going on around you and aware of the needs and the requirements of others. Having the desire to drive that change, but also getting other people to desire to change, making sure you've got the knowledge to deliver it, but also the ability to do so, to make it become a reality. And then finally, it's about reinforcing that over and over, and not just mentioning something once and then moving on to the next thing, but making sure it's actually really embedded before you change and decide to go to the next thing. Now, it might be on your roadmap. You've got 3 or 4 priorities during a year, and you have to accept, look, we're only going to manage 1 or 2, because that reinforcement aspect is really key. And if you do it at a shallow level, the change just recedes and you go back to where you were previously, and you'll be sat there going, okay, why didn't that work? And then you'll have to start all over again. And it's often harder to get things off the ground the second time around than it is to do it the first time around. So thinking about the metrics, you're going to need to make sure that you've got everyone in each department with you, that the metrics you're getting are going to help you make the right decisions, that they're going to drive the performance of what you're doing with leadership, but also that they are going to make sure that if change needs to be adjusted, that's happening too, that you don't just set sail on one plan, you stay with it and you don't change, and you don't go back and think about how it's going to differ for different individuals and what they might need. So getting feedback and constantly reevaluating, even after the initial planning and vision, is really important. Don't forget it and make sure that it's happening. Make sure you listen to what's coming back in. And I often work with schools where we're constantly having to reevaluate and tweak that roadmap, tweak that vision, because of what's coming back to us in the way that people say things are working or not working, depending on the success that you're having at the same time. Has anybody got anything they'd like to ask about leadership before we move into teaching and learning? Nope. Okay, we'll move on to the next pillar. So the next pillar is teaching and learning, and inside teaching and learning, you've got 4 more segments. Thinking about student-centered learning and 21st century learning design. That's transferable skills to take beyond the school and also beyond the classroom. Thinking about curriculum and how you assess pupils in the progress they're making. Also considering the devices that are available to support learning and those learning spaces, which then crosses over with the learning spaces at the same time. Those 4 areas can be quite challenging, and they can often present a lot of questions for you. What you don't want to have is a really tech-heavy experience, and we're not suggesting that the education transformation framework is only around technology. It's very much tempered with those traditional teaching methods and will support and enhance pen and paper, doing paper-based examinations, or doing something in the real world versus technology supporting that and making it possible. That, yes, data will be important, but there's an awful lot of what we call big data out there, which can just bury you in a sea of information. And it's ensuring that the analytics that you have bring the important bits to the fore, and you don't get distracted by the noise of everything else that's going in there. But also thinking about virtual learning spaces. I've mentioned Microsoft Teams, but it's a good example of a virtual learning space. And in quite a few schools are evaluating now, well, do we need virtual learning environments, those platforms that we all invested in 10 years ago? Does Teams or maybe SharePoint with Teams deliver the same thing, or do we still need that virtual learning environment because it's an integral part of what we do, and we're just going to use the platforms that are in Office 365 to complement it? So with those learning spaces that makes up the other segment of this picture, it's thinking about learning zones and how that's either going to be learning zones within a classroom or learning zones across the whole site in the building that you're working with. Is it going to be some more focused on creativity or other themes depending on subject-based motives, or is it going to be that there's going to be a feel for something around learning zones that's universal across all areas, but then you tweak it for particular areas in school? It's also considering the physicalities of the classroom. You've got desks. Well, is it possible to push those to the side to make a big open space sometimes? Maybe you're doing a lesson using augmented reality and you need a lot of space there. Or do you need to, in the long term, think about investments in classrooms, furniture that you're going to have, and when the money comes available for a replacement program, you start to get furniture that's very much movable, not just in the classroom, but movable in the way it is in the classroom itself, and lends itself to desks coming together. So you've got collaborative space, or you've got little pods or individual working space that is not just in a traditional sense of rows or horseshoe shapes and so forth. and that you've got multi-purpose furnishings. It might be that instead of having a big opposing screen on the wall, that you have things that fold away so that you can make use of the wall space, because maybe you're going to do something with green screen and so forth, so that you've got ways to transfer the space around you. And all of that will be in your roadmap and it'll be part of your vision, but it may be further down if you've not got the money, or it might be that you can do this to one room really as an example of what can be achieved, and you gradually phase that out. Or you maybe say, look, we're going to do one room like this for each subject or each area of the school or the faculty. It's work within what you've got in the way of space, resource, money, also the capacity to bring about that change. There's absolutely no point rushing it. You may as well do it well and do it once instead of doing it all badly and then that having an impact on people switching off and it not really having the traction that you wish. The next pillar that we're going to have a look at is intelligent environments, firmly linked to teaching and learning. But this is where we're not just talking about physical environments, we're talking about virtual environments with hybrid learning. We're also considering the safety and security of our students, but we're thinking about operationally, how is that going to be realized, and what analytics and data does that present in the platforms that we got available to us? What can we get out? Can we get things to work for us automatically? So can we automate some of the processes? It might be that you use Microsoft Forms then to gather data, and you might use something like Power Apps that when a form entry comes in, it emails somebody and it transfers the information to an Excel spreadsheet. All of those things could be automated in the background, but it's making better use of the AI that you have available to you to again reduce workloads so that staff can focus on the things that are important, supporting students or helping drive the change if it's going to be a positive change. So with hybrid learning, it's something that we've all been forced to do with the pandemic, and that we were delivering lessons virtually by video platform. We probably had some sort of learning platform or virtual environment behind us. I know that a few of you here have used Teams, but others of you might have used other platforms, and that's okay. It's just thinking about, is it going to give us in the long term the possibilities that we need? Is it going to work for all subjects, or is it limited that it works better for some subjects and not at all for other subjects? Does it allow ease of collaboration, but also at the same time, does it allow people to work individually? So OneNote in Teams is a great example of that. I could have resources that are meant for groups or resources that are meant for small groups and get them to them really quickly. Even if they aren't with me physically, I can send them out as a digital document. But at the same time, it could give me individualized working. So if a pupil or student came to me and it was in the middle of a video meeting and they said, I've completed everything there, I can get them something to challenge them individually or support them individually if they do need additional support. It's also thinking about mobile devices. You may at the moment only have IT suites, and getting laptops or tablet devices is something that's going to come in the future. But also it's what's outside of the school. We spoke about getting parents involved. If you know that when a pupil or a student goes home, they've just got a mobile phone screen to look at, or they've only got a tablet device and they don't have a full-blown computer or a laptop, you need to think about, well, is the experience going to be degraded for them? Are they still going to be able to get access to what they need? Is it going to put them at a disadvantage because they haven't got that device? And do we need to change the way that we're working within the platform to ensure that they're going to have what they need? And then thinking about the different contexts that knowledge and that learning that we get as individuals driving that change is fed back in, and we constantly refine it. There might be things that you attempt to do at the beginning, you go, well, do you know what, it got us through, it sort of worked for most of it, but it excluded this group of pupils over here. We need to tweak that and we need to change that moving forwards. That's great, and hybrid learning and learning environments is a really important element of it, but we should never overstep the fact that we need to, for safeguarding reasons, keep the individuals and their data safe. So it's really important to have a system and a platform in your educational transformation that can be configured to have the appropriate restrictions or the appropriate safeguarding measures so that your students aren't contacted or aren't approached or aren't having their data taken by organizations or individuals that shouldn't have access, but it does mean that they can connect between organizations. That maybe you've got a split campus and you have two buildings, and one set of buildings for a particular set of year groups and another set of buildings for another set of year groups. And instead of staff moving between, what you can do is use technologies to get staff into classrooms in other places or become guest speakers. Or it may be that instead of having students move between buildings, what you can do is you can have them in another classroom with obviously appropriate adults supervision or guidance. But you can get expertise from a teacher that physically couldn't get across because of maybe timetabling constraints, could join with that lesson and give some sort of input or give some sort of enhanced learning that wasn't possible before. But it's all done safely in an environment that's managed, and everyone has their own accounts, but there are appropriate levels of access on those accounts. So the best practices in K-12 school education, but also this goes into college too, that you can have an awareness of anything that's a weak security issue and have a plan in place in your roadmap to identify that and deal with it. The training element is always there, whether it's training from a technical point of view, whether it's training from a teaching point of view, it always needs to be there. And get those teaching resources to be relevant. So it may be, instead of them coming from a leadership team, that they come from people that have developed themselves, and you give people their professional development responsibilities to go and try something and then bring that back and feed it back. You may have student ambassadors that are doing that on a level with pupils as well. So there's going to be lots of opportunities to share that, and it's not a top-down approach. It's very much everybody sharing together, and it becomes part of the culture that everyone's learning, everyone's developing as one, and it's not just coming from a small group of people or one individual in the school. With the operations management, you're going to want effective management of facilities. So we've already spoken about some cost savings, but it might be that previously you had more administrative labour in the school, and that by having things like sync tools to sync between a CRM or an MIS system and get that into Office 365, mundane tasks such as account creation or rules around those accounts and what they can and can't access could all be done by an automated process. It might be linking to library software, and then that's there as a platform that can be used to borrow books. It could be at the same time that you make that link to point of service systems for digital payments, usually around lunch, but it could be around other systems as well. So there's lots of points of consideration operationally, as well as the practicalities that you might have inside of school. Once you've got those analytics, you can be quite proactive with the intervention you use. And instead of reacting to something, you can see a pattern emerging. And because you're data rich, but not blinded by the significant volume, that you're filtering out the bits that are relevant to you in your role. So you might have different dashboards or different graphs or different tables that are used by different people across the organization. You're able to pinpoint ahead of time when things are starting to go wrong, rather than trying to deal with it afterwards and having to clear up a mess. The final pillar that we're going to go into this afternoon is student success. And with student success, it's got 4 sections to it around the leadership in your establishment. It's also around those future ready skills, those 21st century learning skills. It touches on the social, emotional and the pastoral elements, but it also thinks about inclusivity and making sure that all groups and all demographics are included, regardless of whether it's staff, students, parents, governors. They all need to feel like they're part of the same community, and your educational transformation program will attempt to do that at the same time. There are plenty of tools you've got to do that. It might be that you've sent newsletters out previously and you've got quite a high number of different languages spoken by families who attend your school. And it's been really difficult to get information to them in a format that suits them, but also in their own language. So one of the things you could do is you could use the tools in Office 365 to have a single document prepared like a sway, and then have a button at the top where you could drop it down and change it into the language that's required, depending on what your language is that you use outside of school. That gives greater accessibility to parents and guardians that are sending pupils and students in, makes them feel part of the community. They're being more supportive of what you're trying to achieve, but you as a school have only had to produce one document, and you're using the technology to work more smartly and again reduce workloads upon people in the school that are there. Spoken about Minecraft Education Edition. that's also another amazing resource to get the potential of technology in a really sticky way with students. And it's the hook that I've used to draw some students in that have been really difficult to reach. They might have been disaffected, they might have presented with significant behavioral challenges, but by saying that we're going to do something in Minecraft, it could be we're going to do maths. And we're going to look at area and volume. And we may have done that in the past by having 3D objects. We may have drawn it out on squared paper. You may still do that. But what we could do is we could take Minecraft Education Edition. We could take one of the pre-built lessons in there. So for me as a teacher, there's no additional workload. But then the students are going in there and are taking real world skills, 21st century learning skills, and they go from working it out in the real world to then working out in Minecraft and recording it. But as a teacher, I can dip in and still check on what they're doing, or they could use something like Book and Quill to record that, and then I could have that as an exported PDF to check on their progress. The 21st century learning skill element is really important. The future ready skills are the ones that are going to make them successful lifelong learners. It's going to give them a toolkit of transferable skills. It's going to improve success of learning and the progress they make while they're with you in school, because they'll take them to all the subjects around the school. But it's also going to make them great adults. It's going to mean that they're going to be able to think about problems. They're going to be able to grapple with them. They're going to develop resilience. They're going to have problem solving skills. And it's not just about technology. You might use technology as the vehicle, but actually what they're developing are those future ready skills that they take with them for the rest of their lives. And it's also really key part of the educational transformation framework planning to ensure that they are there and that they're all part of it. Now, I've spoken extensively about a roadmap and a vision, but what you'll need to do is either rethink what you've got or build an initial roadmap. Now, there's two different methods in the ETF that you can use, and a lot of people outside of the educational transformation framework use what's called a linear method, maybe where you've got a table and there's certain areas highlighted. So the ETF is around the 4 areas or the 4 pillars that we've looked at, which is what's down the left-hand side of that very small table on screen. Or you can have the Agile method, where initiatives sit on top of each other and they flow out like ripples in the pond. A lot of people still prefer the linear method and putting things compartmentally in boxes, and if they don't get addressed, they get moved forward into the next box, and you come back and you revisit what you planned in 1 year at the beginning of the next year, and you reprioritize, and everything that slides from the left side, sorry, the right side to the left side. So your year 2, 3, and 4, sorry, your year 2, 3, 4, and 5 in a particular year will move over to the left, and your year 2 becomes your year 1, your year 3 becomes your year 2, and then you create a new year 5 because there'll be a gap at the end. And then with the other Agile method, it tends to be that things flow across. You might have them across different years or within 1 year, a bit more like a diagram model that you may use in maths. When you're looking at people and capacity, whether it's culture or it's connected communities or technology and support, it's really important that that roadmap doesn't get bogged down with too much detail. It's meant to be very high level. It may be that you hyperlink to other documents. It may be that you signpost to go and read a different plan, which fleshes out more detail around those areas. But what it will do is give people a high level summary of the direction of travel. And it's really important when you're coming back to communicating the vision and making sure that the vision is clear and transparent to all. And what we would do if you were using the educational transformation framework is spend some time in the first and the second workshops, really delving down into those years and into those pillars and getting the ideas in there, and also considering what you might already have as development priorities and how they're going to be realized. If you go over and look at the Agile method, as we said, it's a very similar process. You're still looking at those same 4 areas, but the Agile roadmap is going to work on tackling overlapping or all aspects of your vision. And it's really for those people that have got things that bridge a number of years and they can't easily be compartmentalized into 1 year, and you can't tackle something within the space of 1 year. It might be a year 1 to 3 program, and that could be an example of getting new pupil or student devices, and it's going to be done for budgetary reasons over a phased period, and therefore it would go across all three. So there might be overlap between all three, or it might be that you actually identify a set of priorities which all overlap. So it will determine which roadmap and which vision method you use underneath. As far as today's introduction is concerned, the 4 pillars and the roadmap is the place you would begin in support with us working with you, or in support with going and using the resources that are available from Microsoft. I'll drop some links into the chat in a little bit while you're doing something else. But also, one of the things that we want to do this afternoon is to offer you the chance to become a qualified Microsoft Innovative Educator. Now, Microsoft Innovative Educator is one of the qualifications that you would normally get in your core team of people driving change, or coming up with the ideas for change, or taking the feedback of the requirements of the staff or the students or the parents. In the Microsoft Innovative Educator community, you can either do self-study units on something called the Microsoft Education Center, or you can get codes when you come along to events like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to gift you the code on the screen, and it's now in the top right hand corner after the screen I've just shown you. And what you can do is you can go to the Microsoft Education Center, and on the Microsoft Education Center after this session, you'll find lots of courses, including many on the Educational Transformation Framework, which this session has been based upon. So you can complete some more self-study, and you'll also find the resources that we've used today and a lot of the slides that have been used today. The link to get to the Microsoft Education Center is there. And once you go into there, in the top right-hand corner, you can sign in. You can use your Office 365 address that you've been supplied with from your school or your college, but you could also sign in with a personal account as well. It doesn't have to be tied to your school account. It's entirely up to you. And then you can start looking at courses that interest you, or look at courses that are really useful for planning the educational transformation. And it might go way beyond looking at the modules which are just centered around the educational transformation framework. It could be, do you know what, we really think Teams is something we need to make more of, and we're going to go and complete a course, or you can get courses that are joined together in learning pathways. One of the things that's currently being done by Microsoft is that they're changing the Microsoft Education Center, which is this amazing resource, into what's called Microsoft Learn Education Center. And there are some new courses that are available on the Learn Education Center that at the moment aren't being added to the old Education Center. You just joined at a point of transition. Eventually, everything will be in the Learn Center, and your account will transfer. There's no pressure at the moment to transfer over, and that code today, when you redeem it, will give you 1,000 points, which will instantly make you a qualified MIE. Or if you've got anybody else you want to share it with that hasn't been able to attend this session, then feel free to pass it on to them as well. And if you're watching this as a recording, that code will remain live, and you'll still be able to redeem it after the event. So the what comes next is always the question. What you need to do is complete with your digital leaders and your transformation team your development plans. Your development plans are going to take up 4 elements. It's going to be around creating that plan, having that firm vision, and that vision being practical, being manageable, and making sure it's inclusive of everybody's needs. And that can take a long time in itself. Once you've got that, it's really important to communicate that. And most of the time, it's better to communicate the individual segments that involve detail in small chunks. We spoke at the beginning about think big, start small. Well, it's the same with the vision and the transformation at the same time. Make sure that you've got the capacity to realize your plans, and that you can build in that capacity in the right places, that it doesn't get swamped or stuck in one particular element. Do constantly evaluate your transformation plan and make sure that you do update it. Don't think that you create it once and it stays like that for the full 3 or 5 years. Certainly evaluate an absolute minimum every 12 months. A lot of people that are really good at this constantly evaluating, or evaluate at least every half year, sometimes every term, 3 times a year. But you will need to make sure that you are linking this really closely to your IT provision, your technical development, and also the operations, the strategic planning in the school, and make sure that everybody knows and everybody continues to be engaged with those 4 areas for this to be successful. want to say a massive thank you for you coming along this afternoon. Really do appreciate your time. If you want to find out more about upcoming courses that are provided through Turn It On and from the Microsoft funded Global Training Partnership, you can follow us on social media. There's also some really influential people there to follow for Microsoft Education UK. If you are coming to this session from other countries around the world, then just drop the UK and follow the Microsoft bit and you will find them. If you've got any questions and you want to contact us, you can either email Microsoft directly or you can email Turn It On at office@turniton.co.uk. And Turn It On has a whole holistic range of support mechanisms that we can work with you during the education transformation process, whether it's looking at your MIS system, your technical support, whether it's CPD and training, or whether it's data compliance. We've got a raft of support there for you. One of the last things I'd like to ask you to do while you're here today is to give me some feedback. The feedback form is really small and mostly little boxes to tick. You don't have to make comments if you don't want to, but we'd like to try and inform this type of session and make it useful for other people, particularly around taster sessions such as the ETF. It's really important to get those feedback in. So I've given you the link to that form there. It's in a Microsoft form, so if you could just pop some feedback in there, and we'll gladly build upon that and we'll reflect and inform what's going to happen. I'm going to stop the recording at this point, but you're welcome to ask me any questions and you can talk to me. You're also welcome to pop anything in the chat. And thank you very much for coming along to the session. If you